You ever notice how the smallest minds have the loudest mouths? The ones who always have an opinion about everything, especially about you. The ones who want to drag you into debates that don't build, only drain. The truth is, you can't argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You can't explain vision to someone who only sees through limitation. You can't convince someone to see your value when their ego needs to keep you small just so they can feel big. See, the moment you start arguing with small minds, you shrink yourself. You lower your frequency just to be heard by people who were never listening in the first place. You start fighting battles that were never meant for you, battles that don't move you forward, they just exhaust your peace. You can't soar like an eagle if you keep landing to explain yourself to pigeons. You can't walk in purpose while stopping to answer every critic who never built anything worth listening to. Never argue with small minds. Let them think what they want. Let them say what they need to say to feel important. Your silence will expose what their words can't hide. Because mature people don't argue, they observe. Confident people don't prove, they move. Wise people don't waste energy on noise, they protect it. So stay calm, stay focused, and let your growth make the statement, because while they're talking, you're transforming. And sooner or later, the same people who doubted you will have to watch the results of the peace they tried to disturb. Arguing with small minds only distracts you from your purpose. Every time you stop to defend yourself, you pause your progress. Every time you explain yourself to someone who's not listening, you give away energy that was meant for your growth. The truth is, not everyone deserves access to your focus. Some people exist solely to test your patience, not to understand your vision. You have to learn the difference between those who are curious about your path and those who are just comfortable seeing you stuck. Because small minds don't argue to learn, they argue to limit. They don't ask to grow, they ask to doubt. And the moment you take their bait, you step out of alignment with your purpose and into the chaos they live in daily. You can't build and battle at the same time. You can't climb higher if you keep stopping to explain the view to people who never intended to climb with you. Arguing with small minds is like trying to convince a closed door that it should open. Doesn't matter how loud you knock, it's still locked by choice. People who refuse to grow will always try to pull you down to their level of comfort. They'll question your moves, your decisions, your silence, not because they care, but because your focus reminds them of everything they're not doing, and instead of rising with you, they'd rather distract you. That's why your peace feels like a threat to small minds. It exposes their lack of discipline. The dangerous thing about arguing with small minds is that it feels like a fight for your reputation, but it's really a distraction from your mission. Every time you respond to pettiness, you trade power for validation. You try to prove a point to people who don't even have one. You start seeking understanding from minds that have already decided to misunderstand you. And what's worse is that while you're busy defending your worth, your purpose is standing still. You stop creating, you stop building, you stop moving, all because you got pulled into a conversation that never should have happened. You've got to protect your focus like it's your future, because it is. Small minds feed on reaction. They want to know that they can shake you, that they can pull you off course. That's why silence is your strength. The moment you stop giving them attention, they lose control. The moment you stop reacting, they lose relevance. And the longer you stay silent, the louder your results become. Because arguing doesn't build anything. It only drains what was already in motion. Growth doesn't require defense. It requires direction. You'll notice that the people with the smallest perspectives have the biggest opinions. They'll tell you what's impossible while you're out there proving it's not. They'll criticize your timing, your choices, your progress, but never take a step toward their own. Because small minds live in a box of limitation, and the moment they see someone breaking out, they panic. They'll throw words, gossip, or criticism just to keep you at their level. But here's the truth. If they could stop you, they would. The fact that they have to talk about you means they can't. So, don't argue with them. Outgrow them. Let your focus become your rebuttal. Let your peace be your answer. The need to argue is a sign of insecurity. Confident people don't chase validation. They let time reveal what truth already knows. When you're walking in purpose, you don't explain your path to everyone who questions it. You just keep moving. You don't respond to noise, you rise above it. The moment you start defending every move you make, you lose momentum. Purpose requires direction. not discussion. You can't argue your way to peace. You have to focus your way there. You can't convince small minds to understand something that was never meant for their comprehension. There will always be people who twist your words, question your motives, or minimize your progress. That's the cost of growth. But your job isn't to convince them otherwise, it's to keep going. Because arguing with small minds doesn't make them see your light. It only dims it. You weren't called to convince, you were called to create. You weren't called to fight every opinion, you were called to fulfill every assignment. And the more you understand that, the less energy you waste trying to be understood by those who never even intended to listen. When you argue with small minds, you become part of their game. They pull you into conversations that go in circles. They bait you with provocation, hoping to make you react, hoping to make you defend yourself, hoping to bring you down to their level. But you can't fight a battle where the only outcome is wasted energy. The best way to win with small minds is to walk away. Let them keep their opinions while you keep your peace, because your silence will say more than your words ever could. You can tell how big someone's vision is by what they choose to argue about. Small minds argue over people, over opinions, over things that don't matter. Big minds discuss purpose, growth, strategy, and solutions. You can't have deep conversations with shallow people. You can't get wisdom from those who choose to stay blind. So stop expecting depth from those who live on the surface. Stop expecting understanding from those who have never walked your path. Focus your energy where it multiplies, not where it drains. Every moment spent explaining yourself to small minds is a moment stolen from your potential. The truth is, progress doesn't need permission, purpose doesn't need validation, and peace doesn't need applause. The only thing you need is consistency. Keep your head down, keep working, and let your growth do the speaking. Eventually, the same people who doubted you will have no choice but to respect your silence, because silence, backed by results, becomes undeniable. When you focus on your purpose, you stop fighting for attention. You stop chasing recognition. You stop proving your worth. Because purpose doesn't need an audience. It needs action. Every argument you avoid is a victory of self-control. Every time you choose silence over defense, you grow stronger internally. You start mastering your emotions, protecting your focus, and building momentum. The people who used to distract you lose access to you. The conversations that used to consume you lose meaning. That's when you start to see how powerful peace really is. Arguing with small minds isn't just a waste of time. It's a violation of purpose, because the energy you use to prove a point could have been used to build something bigger. The time you spend explaining could have been time spent evolving. Every distraction has a cost, and small minds come with the highest price tag. They drain focus, motivation, and momentum. That's why the most successful people are also the quietest. They don't waste their time debating, they direct it. They don't explain, they execute. They understand that the best response to criticism is progress. It's not your job to make small minds see your value. Your vision wasn't meant for their understanding. You don't have to lower your volume just because others can't hear your frequency. You don't have to shrink your dreams to fit someone else's comfort zone. You just have to stay focused, stay grounded, and stay silent long enough for your results to speak for themselves. Because when you're aligned with purpose, you don't argue, you evolve. And the more you evolve, the less their noise matters. So the next time someone tries to pull you into an argument that doesn't serve your growth, pause and remind yourself, they're not your assignment, they're a distraction. Your peace is worth more than being right. Your energy is too valuable to spend on validation. Let small minds talk. That's all they can do. You keep building, keep moving, keep growing, because in the end, arguments fade, opinions change, but purpose always prevails. Silence speaks louder than any defense. The problem is, most people don't understand silence. They think being quiet means you've lost, that not responding means you're weak, that not explaining means you're guilty. But silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. It's a statement that says, I'm not lowering myself to prove a point that time will prove for me. It's the power to stay calm while everything around you tries to pull you into chaos. Silence is not the absence of strength, it's the control of it. It's knowing that your words don't always fix things, sometimes your peace does. The moment you stop defending yourself, you stop being controlled by opinions. You stop giving people permission to dictate your energy, because when you're constantly defending, you're constantly reacting. And reaction is the enemy of peace. You start moving based on what they say, not what you know. But when you stay silent, you remain in control. You don't give away your energy to every accusation, every misunderstanding, every insult. You learn that your peace doesn't depend on being understood. It depends on being centered. Silence is the space where wisdom grows and ego dies. People who need to defend everything often haven't learned to trust themselves. They rely on being heard instead of being grounded. They need to be seen as right instead of knowing they are. But silence belongs to the confident, because when you truly know who you are, you don't have to explain it. You let your actions speak. You let your peace speak. You let time speak. The loudest lessons are taught through calm consistency. That's why silence carries so much weight. It doesn't need noise to be felt. Silence protects you. It saves you from saying things you'll regret. It stops you from reacting emotionally when emotions are high and logic is low. It gives you space to think, to breathe, to see clearly before you act. Most conflicts aren't lost because of what was done. They're lost because of what was said in the heat of the moment. Silence gives you distance between the trigger and the response. It's the shield that guards your peace and the filter that keeps your dignity intact. You start realizing that not every battle deserves your voice. Not every misunderstanding deserves a speech. Some things are better left unanswered, because the moment you try to explain yourself to people who've already made up their minds, you've already lost time and energy you won't get back. The silence isn't ignoring. It's understanding. It's understanding that some things resolve themselves without your involvement. It's understanding that truth doesn't need your defense. It stands on its own. When you learn to be silent, you start seeing how noise distracts people from progress. Everyone's talking, posting, arguing, explaining, but very few are actually growing, because real growth doesn't need to announce itself. It just happens. Silence allows you to work while others talk. It allows you to build without interruption. It allows you to evolve privately. So when you show up publicly, your results speak louder than anything you could have said. That's the kind of power that can't be argued with. That's the kind of strength that makes noise irrelevant. Silence is also how you regain your peace after chaos. When life shakes you, when people test you, when situations drain you, silence becomes your reset. You stop talking about what hurt you and start healing from it. You stop explaining what you're doing and start doing it. You stop needing to be seen and start being at peace with just being. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's alignment. It's where your focus returns, your strength rebuilds, and your clarity sharpens. You'll notice that people who are loud about everything rarely have peace. They're too busy reacting, too busy defending, too busy needing to be right. But those who are silent, they move differently. They're calm under pressure. They listen more than they speak. They don't respond to everything because they don't need to. They understand that silence is control, and control is power. When you master silence, you stop giving others access to your emotions. You stop letting noise dictate your direction. You stop fighting for attention because you've already found contentment. It takes discipline to be silent when you want to speak. It takes maturity to walk away when you could argue. It takes strength to stay calm when someone's trying to provoke you. But that's what growth looks like. It's not about always being right. It's about choosing peace even when you could choose pride. The most powerful people in the world aren't the ones who speak the loudest. They're the ones who know when not to speak at all. They've learned that silence doesn't weaken their message, it strengthens it. Silence reveals more than it hides. It exposes people's intentions. When you stop talking, you start seeing who talks for you, who talks against you, and who talks about you. You start realizing who's loyal in your absence and who only pretends to be in your presence. Silence forces truth to rise, because when you stop reacting, you give people space to reveal themselves. That's why silence is a test and a teacher. It teaches you patience and it shows you what's real. There's something sacred about learning not to respond to everything. You stop living on defense and start living in direction. You stop explaining why you've changed and start walking in the change. You stop announcing what you're building and start letting your work do the speaking, because silence is the bridge between intention and impact. It's what separates the distracted from the disciplined, the emotional from the effective, the reactive from the resilient. Silence also keeps you from wasting words on people who aren't listening. Some minds aren't ready for your perspective. Some hearts aren't open to your truth. And that's okay. You don't have to force them to understand. You don't have to repeat yourself until you're drained. You just stay quiet, stay focused, and keep moving. Eventually, they'll see what your silence was saying all along, that your peace was more important than being right. The most misunderstood people are often the most peaceful ones, not because they don't care, but because they've learned that peace costs explanations. They've accepted that you can't convince everyone, and you don't need to. They've learned to stop talking about it and start walking in it. That's what silence gives you, the ability to live in your truth without broadcasting it, to stand firm in your boundaries without defending them, to protect your peace without apology. Silence teaches you detachment. It helps you stop reacting to every emotion, every opinion, every situation. It helps you realize that everything doesn't need your voice to validate it. You can be aware without being reactive. You can be present without being pulled. You can be at peace without being understood. Because silence doesn't mean you're ignoring life. It means you're managing it. It means you're choosing which parts of it deserve your energy and which parts don't. When you learn to let silence speak for you, life becomes lighter. You start moving with intention instead of impulse. You start hearing your own thoughts more clearly. You start understanding that you don't owe everyone an explanation for your peace. You realize that silence isn't about withholding. It's about protecting your mind, your emotions, your focus, and your direction. Because the more you explain, the more people twist. But the less you speak, the less power they have. There's a calm that comes from not needing to respond, a strength that comes from not needing to defend, a confidence that comes from knowing silence doesn't mean weakness, it means wisdom. You start to understand that your growth doesn't need an audience, your healing doesn't need validation, and your decisions don't need debate. You start to see that the quietest people often make the loudest impact, because while everyone else is talking, they're moving. While others are proving, they're progressing. While others are arguing, they're aligning. Silence is your superpower. It's the language of discipline, the posture of confidence, and the shield of peace. It's what separates those who are ruled by emotion from those who are led by purpose. You don't need to fight to be understood when you've learned that silence says more than words ever could. You just stay calm, stay focused, and let the results speak for themselves. Because the loudest voice in any room will never be the one making noise, it'll be the one moving in peace. Growth will always offend those who choose to stay small. The moment you start changing, people start talking. The moment you start moving different, people start questioning. The moment you start focusing on peace instead of drama, suddenly you're acting different. That's because growth exposes what others have been hiding from within themselves. Your evolution makes them uncomfortable, not because you've done something wrong, but because your growth reminds them of what they've refused to face. Some people will hate you, not because of what you've done to them, but because you had the courage to do what they never will. You decided to rise, to heal, to move forward, and your decision challenges their comfort. Growth is offensive to small minds because it breaks unspoken agreements. You used to complain with them, gossip with them, settle with them. You used to speak the same language of limitation, and now you don't. Now your silence bothers them. Now your peace confuses them. Now your focus threatens them. Because people who choose not to grow will always try to keep you where they left you. They'll remind you of your past every time your future starts to shine. They'll try to reduce your progress to luck, to arrogance, to change they can't comprehend. But you don't owe them comfort. You don't owe them familiarity. Growth requires letting go of what used to feel safe so you can step into what's meant for you. Truth is, some people loved you when you were broken because it made them feel needed. They loved you when you were lost because it made them feel found. They loved you when you were small because it made them feel big. But once you start healing, once you start walking in purpose, once you stop needing their validation, their comfort fades because your independence threatens their control. Your progress makes them face their own stagnation. That's why not everyone can celebrate you. Not because they hate you, but because they see in you what they're afraid to become. Growth isn't always glamorous. It's uncomfortable, it's isolating, it's misunderstood. You'll outgrow conversations, habits, and even people. You'll start to notice that peace feels better than attention, that silence feels better than validation, that solitude feels better than pretending. And that's when you start to realize that growth doesn't always look like success. It looks like distance. It looks like saying no when you used to say yes. It looks like staying quiet when you used to argue. It looks like protecting your peace, even when people call it pride. But that's what it means to grow. It means choosing alignment over approval. It means choosing maturity over being liked. The hardest part of growth isn't the change, it's the reactions. People will project their limitations onto your evolution. They'll question your motives, your character, your humility. They'll say you've changed as if that's something to be ashamed of. But what they really mean is that you stopped being manageable. You stopped fitting into the version of you that made them comfortable. You stopped needing their permission to become who you were meant to be. And that will always offend those who prefer things to stay the same, because your change requires them to confront their choice not to. When you start growing, you start seeing through people's patterns. You start recognizing manipulation disguised as care, competition disguised as support, jealousy disguised as jokes. And that awareness makes people uncomfortable, because as long as you were unaware, you were easier to control. But once you wake up, once you grow, once you see things for what they are, you can't unsee them. You start setting boundaries. You start saying no, and suddenly you become difficult. But boundaries aren't disrespect. They're protection. They're the fence around your peace, and people who benefited from your lack of boundaries will always call them walls. Growth requires isolation because clarity doesn't come in crowds. You have to step back to see who's really with you and who's just around you. You start noticing that the same people who once cheered for your potential can't handle your progress. They were comfortable with your dreams as long as they stayed dreams. But the moment you start living them, they change. That's because your growth disrupts their excuses. Your evolution becomes a mirror, and some people don't like what they see. Instead of growing with you, they'll try to pull you back. That's why protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's survival. You can't apologize for growing. You can't dim your light to make small minds comfortable. You can't shrink yourself to fit into spaces you've already outgrown. The moment you start minimizing your growth to keep others from feeling small, you stop evolving. And you owe yourself more than that. You owe yourself the freedom to expand fully, unapologetically, even if it offends those who prefer the smaller version of you, because their comfort was never your responsibility. Their approval was never your requirement. Your only job is to keep becoming the best version of yourself, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Growth is a silent revolution. It doesn't always announce itself with applause. It starts quietly inside you. It's the moment you stop complaining and start changing. It's the moment you stop seeking pity and start seeking purpose. It's the moment you realize that peace costs people. Not everyone can go with you, and that's okay. Because growth requires space. Space for new habits, new discipline, new environments. You can't carry old baggage into a new season and expect peace to follow. You have to release the noise that keeps you small so you can make room for the strength that takes you higher. The more you grow, the quieter you become. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer need to prove anything. You stop explaining your silence, your distance, your focus. You stop defending your decisions. You start understanding that real power doesn't chase validation. It rests in self-awareness. You learn that peace isn't found in controlling everything. It's found in trusting yourself. And the people who haven't reached that place yet will misinterpret it. They'll call it arrogance when really it's healing. They'll call it coldness when really it's peace. But that's okay. You're not responsible for their misunderstanding. Every step of growth requires letting go. Letting go of who you used to be, letting go of who others expect you to be, letting go of what no longer serves your purpose. And every time you let go, you offend someone who benefited from your old version. But that's the price of progress. You can't evolve and stay accessible to everything that used to drain you. You can't move forward and still entertain what holds you back. You have to choose. You can keep your peace or keep their approval, but you can't have both. Growth is messy, it's lonely, it's misunderstood, but it's also necessary, because every time you choose to rise, you break another cycle. Every time you choose silence over argument, focus over distraction, peace over pride, you grow. And that growth will always make small minds uncomfortable because it exposes their refusal to change. But you can't shrink to make them feel secure. You can't pause your healing because they're not ready for it. You can't explain your transformation to those who still think in limitation. You just keep moving, keep evolving, keep choosing peace, even when it's lonely, because growth will always offend those who choose to stay small, but it will also free you from everything that ever tried to keep you that way.